Ladies and gentlemen, they threw dirt on your name. They whispered behind closed doors, hoping your spirit would collapse. They walked away when you needed someone to stand close, and yet you're still here, stronger, wiser, unshakable. But had you ever asked why? The reason you must stay for this entire message is simple. Because the people who tried to break you never knew the power that dwells within you. But you're about to find out. They saw your outer shell. They never met your inner power. This is not just inspiration. This is revelation. You'll leave knowing why nothing could break you and how to walk into your destiny, untouched by pain. They tried to break you because they mistook your silence for weakness. But they didn't understand the laws that govern your being. You are not formed by opinions. You are formed by consciousness, by what you dare to believe in the quiet. You see, reality bends for the one who refuses to let external circumstances dictate internal identity. When the world screamed that you were done, broken, forgotten, something deeper whispered that you were just beginning. That whisper was not your imagination playing tricks. It was your inner world rearranging itself to reflect your divine resilience. Let me tell you a sacred truth. Nothing that is aligned with the highest truth can be broken. It can only be revealed. Every trial revealed you. Every betrayal exposed your strength. Every tear watered the roots of your awakening. They thought they were burying you, but you were being planted. So how did you become unshakable? You stopped fighting in the flesh and began aligning in the spirit. You shifted from begging for peace to becoming it. You stopped replaying the pain and began rehearsing the promise. You chose to believe not what your eyes could see, but what your inner awareness could declare. And that belief, that imaginal act, became the cornerstone of your unshakable foundation. No one told you this before. Your imagination is not fantasy. It is divine strategy. The moment you assumed your power, your enemies lost theirs. Now your silence is no longer fear. It's knowing. Your solitude is no longer isolation. It's elevation. And your scars, they're not wounds. They're proof that you were forged in fire, not destroyed by it. To remain unshakable is not about avoiding pain. It's about seeing it differently. You look at storms and say, "Thank you, you reminded me of who I really am." You stand in stillness, not because there's no battle, but because you already won it on the inside. You are not what they did to you. This may be hard to accept at first, especially when the wounds feel fresh and the voices of those who doubted you still echo in your mind. But the truth is, your reality, your identity is not determined by the outer actions of others, but appearances lie. Appearances shift. Appearances are only the shadows of belief. What is real, what is eternal, is what you hold in consciousness. That is the foundation of your existence. What they said, what they did, how they rejected or ridiculed you, none of it holds any creative power in your world unless you accept it as true. That is the key. You were never called to absorb the narrative others tried to impose on you. You were called to awaken to a higher awareness of who you are and where your power truly lies. When people tried to tear you down, they were acting from their own limitation. And in truth, They were never the source of your value to begin with. When you realize this, something sacred happens inside you. You begin to withdraw your identity from the opinions of others. You begin to reclaim your authority, not as a reaction, but as a remembering. All your life you were told stories about who you should be, what you can and cannot do, how far you will or will not go, but those stories, no matter how loud, were just that, stories. And the author of your life is not the crowd. The author is the self, the inner man, the divine being within you. You are not what happened to you. You are what you accept as truth about you. And that acceptance happens inwardly, in silence and stillness. That's where your power lives. Your circumstances are reflections, not roots. They do not define you. They reveal you. When they tried to break you, they did not see your inner world. They judged you based on what could be seen. Your actions, your failures, your quiet moments of doubt. But what they could not see, what they never even imagined, was the reservoir of divine authority sitting quietly within your soul, waiting for you to awaken. And you did. Perhaps not all at once, perhaps through tears and silence, but you did. They thought they had the final word, but they were not the author. The world can speak, but only you can decree. And the moment you stopped identifying with what they did and started affirming who you really are, a shift occurred that nothing external could undo. You became unshakable not because you won every battle, but because you stopped letting the battle define you. That is power. You see, people only have the power to influence what you allow into your belief system. Once you understand that the world is responding not to what has been done to you, but to what you believe about yourself, you begin to take ownership. You begin to revise. You begin to heal. Not by rewriting the past, but by replacing the lie with the truth that you are whole, that you are chosen, that you are the embodiment of divine imagination, clothed in flesh, learning how to create consciously. So you were not broken, you were being revealed. You were never weak, you were simply unaware. But now that you see, everything changes. You no longer repeat what they said. You declare what you know. You no longer dwell on what happened. You focus on what is becoming. This is the great mystery. They tried to define your limits, and in doing so, they activated your potential. They pressed against you, and in that resistance you discovered your depth. They shut doors in your face, and in those moments of silence you heard the voice within you saying, "That was never your door." Every denial, every setback, every attack became a silent teacher reminding you of your true nature, that you were never meant to be shaped by this world. You were meant to reshape it from within. You became unshakable when you stopped feeding on outer validation, when you stopped needing permission to be great, when you decided that the truth within you mattered more than the lies surrounding you, and that truth, the awareness of your divinity, of your power to create, to shift, to rise, is what no man can take away. That truth is eternal, existed before the first insult, and will outlive the last doubt. They tried to break you, but they failed, not because you fought harder, but because you woke up. You stopped being who they thought you were and became who you were always meant to be. You realized that the real battle was never between you and them, but between your higher self and the illusion of limitation. And once you chose truth, you were no longer breakable. You were free. The storm was never meant to destroy you. It was never a punishment nor a sentence on your life. It was a divine setup, an invitation to become aware of what was already within you. When people walked away, when life closed in, when the walls seemed to fall all around you, it felt like the end. But what felt like the end was actually the beginning of the greatest unveiling of your spiritual authority. You see, you were never meant to be carried by comfort. You were meant to be revealed through resistance. The moment everything was taken from you was the same moment everything inside you was waking up. It seemed like chaos on the surface, but within that chaos was a secret design. Something bigger was happening, something the outer world could not see. You thought you were being buried, but in truth, you were being planted. Every tear, every betrayal, every closed door was part of a spiritual architecture that led you back to yourself, to your source, to your origin. The storm was not a sign of weakness. It was a tool of transformation. You didn't lose control. You lost the illusion that you ever needed it. And that was your turning point. That was where the shift began. Because when the storm raged and all the familiar anchors were removed, you were forced to find stability in what cannot be shaken, your inner being. They tried to break you through rejection, through judgment, through doubt. But their attempts only pushed you into the realization that you were never meant to be shaped by the approval of others. The storm stripped away everything that wasn't real. It showed you what could not last, and what would always remain. And what remained was not the pain, it was the presence, the still sacred presence of your divine identity. In the silence after the storm, you began to hear differently. You began to perceive the quiet voice within you, the one that had always been there, whispering, "You are more than this moment." It had been drowned out by noise, by pressure, by expectation, but in the storm, all those voices fell away. And what you were left with was truth, the truth that you are not your circumstances, you are not your past. You are not what they called you or what they predicted for you. You are what you choose to believe about yourself. And that belief is the seed of every new beginning. The storm was not the enemy. It was the revealer. It showed you the cracks in your foundation so that you could rebuild on something unbreakable. It removed your dependency on the external world, so that you could begin to build inwardly, with intention, with purpose, with awareness. And in that building process, you discovered your true strength, not the kind of strength that fights or resists, but the kind that knows, the kind of strength that comes from alignment with the eternal. Those who tried to break you were not aware of what they were truly doing. They thought they were defeating you, but they were merely activating what had been asleep inside you. They became unknowing servants of your awakening. And as painful as it was, you now see that you could never have discovered this version of yourself if you had stayed in comfort. The storm was the doorway. The struggle was the unveiling. You are no longer who you were before the storm. That version of you needed validation. That version needed to be understood, accepted, and included. But this version, this awakened version, needs only truth. And truth does not come from the outer world, it comes from stillness, from the quiet recognition that everything you need is already within you. We didn't come through the storm by chance. You came through by choosing to see differently, by refusing to give in to despair, by holding on to the smallest thread of belief when everything around you said it was over. And that decision, quiet, unseen, and perhaps even unnoticed by the world, was the moment everything changed. That was the moment you became unshakable. Now, when you look back, You don't see a storm that defeated you. You see a storm that awakened you, that revealed you, that burned away the false so the true could rise. And it did. It rose in your heart, it rose in your mind, it rose in your quiet persistence and your refusal to give up. It rose every time you chose faith over fear, presence over panic, stillness over striving. They tried to break you. But the storm showed you that you were never breakable to begin with. You were simply unaware of your own power. But now you know. Now you stand not just healed, but aware. Not just surviving, but creating. Not just enduring, but elevating. And no storm, no voice, no circumstance can take that away. The storm was not your ending, it was your entrance. And from this place of knowing, of clarity, of awakened power, you will never return to who you were. You don't need to, because who you are now is more than enough. There is a sacred point in every person's life when they realize that the world outside is only echoing what is already happening within. That moment is not marked by loud applause or external celebration. It is often quiet, lonely, and deeply personal. It happens when you've been pushed to the edge, when the opinions of others no longer hold weight, when all you have left is the choice to believe something greater about yourself. That moment is the beginning of transformation because everything in your life begins and ends with belief. When they tried to break you, they attacked the outer layer, your image, your reputation, your situation. But what they could never touch was the inner world, the place where your destiny was being authored. You were not made unshakable by circumstances falling into place, but by learning to believe in spite of them. You believed not because you had proof, but because you had vision. And that vision, quiet and unseen, was the seed of your power. Belief is not passive. It is not a weak hope waiting for the world to change. Belief is creative. It is the very act of shaping reality from the invisible realm. When you began to choose belief over fear, when you began to hold a new image of yourself in your imagination, you activated a spiritual law, a divine principle that the world cannot override. What you consistently accept as true in your inner world must eventually show up in your outer world. The moment you became certain in your spirit, your reality had no choice but to reflect that certainty in time. But you did not arrive at this realization through ease. No, it was forged in fire. When life collapsed around you, when voices tried to convince you that you were not enough, you stood in the unseen realm and declared who you were. That declaration, though silent, was more powerful than any public announcement, because it did not rely on the approval of others. It was rooted in truth, and truth always outlives lies. You were tested not to be broken, but to reveal to yourself that belief is stronger than evidence, that your inner conviction holds more authority than your present condition. The world said it was over, but you believed it was just beginning. They said you were finished, but you imagined your rise. And that imagination, that persistent inner vision, began to rewrite your experience. Slowly, quiet, steadily, until the world began to change, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. Everything begins in imagination. When they tried to define your limits, you chose to imagine beyond them. When they labeled you, you rewrote the label in your mind. You saw yourself rising even as your feet stood in pain. You saw yourself whole even as your heart was breaking. And because you believed, your world began to bend toward that belief, not by force, but by law. That is how you became unshakable, not by denying reality, but by understanding that reality itself is pliable. It follows the patterns of your inner vision. No one can break the person who knows that their power is within. The world can shake, the people can change, the facts can shift, but the one who knows that all creation flows from belief remains calm. You became unshakable because you no longer needed outward assurance. You stopped checking to see if others approved. You stopped waiting for the evidence, you simply believed. And in that belief, you built something the world could not shake, faith rooted in vision, not sight. You did not need a crowd to confirm you. You did not need applause to keep going. What you needed was already within you, the quiet authority to hold your image of truth regardless of the noise around you. And you held it in silence, in uncertainty, in darkness, until light began to break through, until the vision within you became clearer than the fear outside you. That was the shift. That was the turning. And now you walk differently. Not in arrogance, but in knowing. Not in pride, but in presence. You were not made unshakable by chance. You were made unshakable by choice. The choice to believe when you had every reason to doubt. The choice to persist when quitting seemed easier. The choice to rise in your mind long before anything changed in your world. That is the foundation of your strength. That is the substance of your transformation. They tried to break you, but they only proved how powerful your belief truly is. And now you are not who you once were. You no longer react to the world, you create from within. You no longer beg life to be kind. You speak life into your day. You no longer seek signs. You are the sign. You no longer wait for change. You are the change. Because belief made you unshakable. Because vision taught you that what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. They tried to break you, but they awakened something stronger. A creator. A believer, a soul on fire with divine certainty. And that version of you is the one no storm can touch. The pain did not come to stay. It came to reveal. It came to awaken what was buried under years of programming and limitation and dependency on things that were never meant to define you. When you were hurt, misunderstood, rejected, or betrayed, it wasn't because you were weak or lost. It was because life was calling you inward. Because only in the silence of pain do we begin to hear the real voice, the voice of divine identity speaking from within. The pain was never punishment. It was preparation. It was the fire that separated the false from the true, the shadow from the substance. You were not meant to escape the pain. You were meant to walk through it with awareness, because in the walking you became someone new, not someone defined by the experience, but someone transformed through it. While others saw failure, you discovered foundation. While others saw brokenness, you found beauty, being rebuilt at the soul level. Pain did not stop you. It shaped you. It clarified your vision. It refined your purpose. And it brought you face to face with what cannot be taken from you, your spiritual inheritance. You do not need the world's permission to rise from pain. You do not need approval to heal, to begin again, or to transform, because healing does not begin outside. It begins in the quiet decision to no longer identify with what hurt you. It begins when you say, "This happened to me, but it is not who I am." You stepped into a new realm the moment you understood that the pain was part of your unfolding. That revelation gave you power. That realization made you dangerous to everything that once tried to contain you. The greatest shifts happen in stillness, not when you fight the pain, but when you see it for what it truly is, a signal, a symbol, a sacred passage to the other side of yourself. Pain only has power when you believe it defines you. But when you understand that it is a messenger and not a master, you begin to take back your authority. You no longer ask, why me? And with that question, doors open. Your perception changes. You stop waiting for life to make sense, and you start creating meaning from the inside out. You did not come through the fire to remain wounded. You came through it to become whole and more aware than you have ever been. The wound, though real, was only temporary. The wisdom it brought, however, is eternal. Because in the process of healing you were reintroduced to the most important truth, that nothing outside of you can ever determine your worth. That you are not a sum of your broken moments, but a vessel of power being made more radiant through them. Pain stripped away the layers that covered your true self. It forced you to let go of what was never meant to stay. Relationships, titles, roles, expectations, all of them faded so that something deeper could be born. And in their absence you found presence. You found your voice. You found your ability to see with inner eyes and walk by inner light. The very things you thought were losses turned out to be liberations. They thought the pain would silence you, but it made you speak with more clarity. They thought the pain would make you bitter, but it made you more compassionate. They thought you'd stop showing up, but you returned with greater purpose. You rose not because it was easy, but because you remembered who you are. Not who the world told you to be, not who the pain tried to convince you you were, but who you have always been beneath the surface, whole, powerful, and unshakable. You are not healed when the world changes. You are healed when your inner response to the world changes. When you no longer react from the wound, but respond from the truth. When you stop revisiting what hurt you and start building from what it taught you. That's the transformation. That's the new life. And it's already within you. The moment you stop looking outward for rescue and begin looking inward for revelation, you begin to rise not just out of pain, but into purpose. Your journey through pain was sacred. It taught you that you don't need to be fixed. You need only to be aware. Aware of what you carry, of what you've always carried, even in your lowest moments. You were not abandoned. You were being aligned. You were not overlooked. You were being preserved for a time such as this. The pain was a threshold, and now you've crossed it. You are not just surviving anymore, you are seeing. And what you now see, you can never unsee. Your worth, your calling, your divinely protected path. So walk forward now, not in fear, but in fullness. Speak now, not from your scars, but from your spirit. And live, not as one trying to escape pain, but as one who knows it has already served its highest purpose. You are not broken. You are awakened. And that awareness is your power. You are unshakable not because you have never faced storms, but because you have learned to anchor yourself within. True strength is not about outer dominance or visible defense. It is quiet, still, internal. It is not in how loud you speak, but in how deeply you know. And this knowing, this quiet certainty, is what makes you immovable, unbreakable, untouchable by the chaos that surrounds others. You are not strong because you were untouched. You are strong because nothing could erase what was etched into your spirit from the beginning, the truth of who you are. There were moments when everything around you looked like it would fall apart. Relationships dissolved, opportunities vanished, people you trusted turned away. Yet even when it appeared that all support had been pulled out from under you, something held you. Not the things of the world, but the invisible force within, the divine presence that cannot be seen, only felt. It reminded you in the silence that you were never alone. And when you chose to listen rather than panic, something profound happened. You stopped fearing the storm. You began to walk through it as if you were born for it. And indeed, you were. The moment you stopped depending on the external to define your internal, you began to master life. When others sought validation, you sought vision. When others were tossed by opinions, you stood on inner truth. Your strength is not reactionary, it is rooted. You do not move with the noise. You move with intention. There is a stillness in you now that no amount of adversity can disturb. Not because you are perfect or untouched, but because you have chosen to see from within. You have shifted your focus from what is happening to you to what is unfolding through you. And that change in perception has made you free. You learned that being unshakable is not about building walls, but about opening your eyes. You saw that all things are drawn to you by the vibration you hold. And when you began to choose a vibration of peace, of faith, of love, then the entire experience of life began to reconfigure around you. No longer did you need to resist or fight. You simply aligned. You chose to become the embodiment of what you once chased. You realized that the world reflects the inner state, and so, if you want to change what you see, you must first change where you stand with. They could not break you because you stopped being defined by their actions. They tried to confuse you with their chaos, but you saw through the illusion. You no longer played in the realm of surface drama. You saw deeper. You saw that people act from their own level of consciousness, and what they do has nothing to do with your value. That awakening was your liberation. You no longer needed apology to find closure, nor recognition to feel worthy. You remembered your source, and when you live from your source, no outside force can ever shake you. This awareness is your shield. This knowing is your power. You do not need to shout about it or prove it to anyone. It radiates from you in silence. People can feel it in your presence. There's something in you now that doesn't flinch when things fall apart. Because you no longer associate falling apart with failure. You associate it with rearrangement, with a higher order being set in motion. You are no longer scared of endings. You have come to understand that endings are only illusions. What truly matters cannot end, because it was never born of the temporary. The unshakable soul knows that everything that appears lost is either being returned in higher form or removed to make space for better alignment. You do not cry over the closed door because you have learned to bless it. You do not fear the unknown because the unknown is now your playground. The spirit in you knows where to go, even when the mind cannot see. So you listen, you trust, you walk, not by sight, but by faith born of deep knowing. And this is what makes you unshakable, not arrogance, not pride, but clarity. A clarity that says, no matter what rises up against me, I will not be moved from my inner truth. I will not be shaken from my center. And when you live from this place, you become a living demonstration of what it means to be a divine being having a human experience. You do not curse the storm. You bless it. You do not fear the test. You pass through it, knowing that every challenge is only an echo of your former beliefs dissolving. What you face on the outside is only reflecting the inner changes taking place. You are unshakable because you no longer believe that circumstances are stronger than you. You have remembered that you are the dreamer of your own dream. You are not merely reacting to life, you are creating it. And as this truth deepens within you, you will find that nothing outside of you can dictate your peace. You carry it now, it walks with you, it breathes through you, and in this you are free. So stand firm, not in the pride of ego, but in the certainty of spirit. They tried to break you, yes, but they only succeeded in helping you awaken. And that awakening made you untouchable in the only place that truly matters, within. The world outside will always try to define you. It will point to your past, your failures, your limitations, and say, this is who you are. But what the world cannot see is the unseen reality taking shape within you. They tried to break you by labeling you, by reducing your identity to circumstances and moments that do not represent the totality of your being. But the truth is this: no label, no judgment, no failure, no wound, none of it can define who you really are unless you agree with it in the silence of your mind. What defines you is not what happened, but what you choose to believe about what happened. In every trial, in every setback, there was a sacred opportunity to shift your identity, not downward into despair, but upward into divine remembrance. You were never created to be a victim of your circumstances. You were born to remember the eternal truth of your being. And in that remembering, you transcend the noise, the hurt, the limitations that others tried to place upon you. The moment you stop reacting to the outer picture and start responding to the truth within, you begin to rewrite the narrative. And not only do you rewrite it, you live into a higher version of it. You no longer operate from the belief that you are small or defeated. You begin to embody the knowing that you are powerful, whole, and chosen. The world may try to tell you otherwise, but you are not here to echo the world. You are here to transform it from the inside out. They tried to break you because they couldn't understand your light. Sometimes it was envy, sometimes it was projection, sometimes it was simply fear disguised as rejection. But all of it was permitted so you could come face to face with your truest source of identity. You see, if your identity had been dependent on people's approval, you would have been destroyed when they walked away. If it had been rooted in success, you would have crumbled when you failed. But now you know. What they took from you only revealed what they couldn't give you. A lasting identity born of spirit, not of form. You are not the version of yourself that experienced pain. You are the awareness that observed it, endured it, and rose from it. And as this realization takes root, you stop chasing validation and begin nurturing revelation. You start seeing yourself not as someone recovering from life, but as someone creating life, not from trauma, but from truth. This shift is not visible to others at first, but it is powerful, and soon the outer world begins to reflect it, because the outer world is always echoing back the inner state of consciousness you dwell in. They try to define you by the lowest point of your journey, but the lowest point was not the end. It was the beginning of your return. It was the moment your soul began to wake up and say, I am not what I've been through. I am not this pain. I am not this season. And from that moment on, everything changed. You began walking with new vision. You began speaking from new wisdom. You no longer needed to argue your worth, because your worth was no longer up for debate. It was revealed from within. You are the image and likeness of something eternal. And the more you agree with that truth, the less the opinions, rejections, and judgments of others matter. They tried to break you, but they only broke the illusions around you. They shattered the false selves you had built for survival. And now what remains is something far greater. Authentic, grounded, unshakable. You have nothing to prove. Nothing to defend. Your very presence now speaks the truth without a word. You are no longer acting from pain. You are acting from presence. To be unshakable is to be rooted in your divine identity. It is to know that even when life tries to put you in a box, your spirit cannot be confined. They may have spoken words against you, walked away from you, doubted you, but none of that changed your essence. They thought they were weakening you, but all they were doing was removing what didn't belong. Every rejection became redirection, every betrayal became purification, and every moment of doubt became fuel for deeper discovery. So now, as you look back, do not curse the pain, bless it. Do not resent the ones who tried to break you. Thank them, because without them you would not have come to this moment of remembrance. You would not have stripped away the false identities you carried. You would not have discovered what is eternal in you, and that, above all else, is your power. You now walk not as a product of pain, but as a carrier of purpose, not seeking to be defined by what's outside, but knowing deeply that who you are within is more powerful than anything the world can name. That is how you became unshakable, not by escaping adversity, but by remembering who you are in the midst of it. Not by resisting rejection, but by using it as a doorway to self-realization. Your identity is no longer built on sand. It is built on the rock of truth. And in this truth you stand, not moved by the winds of opinion, not swayed by the tides of circumstance. You are steady. You are strong. You are unshakable. They tried to break you because they couldn't understand you. But the truth is, they were never meant to. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be transformed. And you, my friend, have been transformed. Now rise unshakable. Not because nothing touched you, but because nothing could defeat what was divine within you.